up with these ideas. Joining us now from Capitol Hill, dictatorial ideas, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. Representative Kinzinger is also a pilot in the Air National Guard. Thank you for your service. Joe?
You bet.
All right. Hey, Adam, going to go down a checklist really quickly. Military parade, good idea, bad idea?
I think depends. I think it's probably not going to happen. Bad idea if you're talking about tanks and, you know, ICBMs rolling down. If it's just a pass and review, which the military practices for, which is just kind of ranks of people passing by and saluting the commander-in-chief, okay.
Okay. What about the budget deal? Obviously, a lot of concerns. It busts the budget cap. It gives us, moves us again towards record deficits. Pushes us closer towards $30 trillion in national debt. It's going to unsettle the markets even more down the road. What do you think about the president's budget plan?
Well, I'm going to vote for it, depending on the detail. We haven't seen the actual details, just top line, and so I always kind of put that caveat out there because you never know. But look, we've neglected our military, and there is a massive cost to rebuilding the military the longer you neglect it. Same as like interstates and bridges. The more they crumble, the more expensive they are to fix. And secondly, we can't sit. I have my colleagues that come on all the time on TV and say we need to bomb ISIS and be ready for North Korea and have missile defense. And they name all these litany of things, which we do need to do, but then they're going to vote against giving the people the funds to do it. But that said, with the deficit issue, the problem is, and we all know this, it's just nobody talks about it, 75% of federal spending Congress doesn't even have control over. We don't appropriate. It's entitlement spending. Some people get offended by that term. It's what it's officially called. And you can take things like, whether it's Social Security or Medicare, for a guy like me who's 39, almost 40, and say, we're going to make some changes for you, Adam, to save it for the current generation. And that levels the debt trajectory, but we're just not having those conversations.
But again, this still adds $500 billion to spending. The debt, I mean, if not now, when are Republicans going to start worrying about long-term debt deficits?
Well, I think we're worried. We've been talking about it. You look at the budgets we've passed. You know Paul Ryan well, and you know his passion for saying getting these things under control. The problem is you have to have willing partners on the other side of the aisle, and frankly, I have a hard time thinking we could get meaningful reform for entitlements, again, for younger people, like my age, even through the Senate.
Right.
If you look at the debt curve of this country, the issue's not in the next 10 years, it's year 20 and 30 where this thing just skyrockets. If we see a budget, now this is getting into inside baseball, but if we could look at a budget window outside of 10 years and make changes to take effect in 10 years and watch that curve come down, we can solve all the problems. But it's going to take both sides, you know, holding hands and jumping off the cliff, which we're very reticent to do out here, unfortunately.
But you talk about needing willing partners. Republicans control everything. You passed a massive tax cut that is going to add $1.5 trillion to the national debt. This spending bill is going to add a lot of money to the national debt. Again, it seems like Republicans should be in a better position today to control spending than ever.
Yeah, but we all know the reality. It's 60 votes in the Senate, and even our own folks in the Senate, if we talk about, hey, we want to do the long-term things to fix the debt problem in this country, it won't get through the Senate. It's a reality. So what happens in this debt deal? We say we want to fix the military. The Democrats say, well, we have some priorities on the domestic side, and we actually are getting kind of a 1.3 to 1 spending increase. I don't like it. Look, it's not perfect. But when we're looking at what our military is facing and looking at this and saying if we go into a government shutdown, the answer is going to be way worse, we'll take this now. But we need the president and, frankly, everybody to say, how can we get through this entitlement issue long-term? Again, not scaring current seniors. That's what we do too much of out here. How can we all kind of hold hands and fix this problem together? And, you know, I'm not overly optimistic it's going to happen today, but it needs to.
Rick.
Adam, Rick Tyler. Republicans have run consistently on the idea that of deficit reduction and fiscal responsibility. We were told, conservatives were told, if we won the House, we would get all kinds of fiscal meaningful reforms done, and then if we won the Senate, then we won the presidency, and now we have all three. Moreover, as the president is saying and Republicans are saying, the economy is growing at a very good rate. The stock market still is at record highs. Now is not the time to close budget gaps and deficits, as you say you'd like to do. Describe to me a better time when when we could have more fiscal responsibility and Republicans would actually stand for fiscal responsibility. Paul Ryan, who wrote the roadmap, who was going to get us out of debt, seems to have lost his GPS.
Yeah, so now is the time. 8 years ago was the time. The problem is we got into this position because of something called the Budget Control Act. And instead of having the courage to cut $2.1 trillion to the national debt and deficit by going into areas that called entitlement spending that people are like, oh man, you know, that's always tough to deal with. This thing called sequester, which was a blunt hammer, never intended to happen, happened. And that's where we went just across the board cuts to domestic spending and across the board cuts to the military. We had 80 military training deaths last year, which is 3 times the number of military that died in combat last year. And that's because of this degrading military capacity. So looking at this saying we have to reverse that blunt fiscal hammer to the military, there's a cost for the Democrats to be on board, which is some domestic spending. And I would pray, I would hope that we could look at the long-term issue in this country starting tomorrow. I'm just not optimistic that that's going to happen, but I've talked about it. I'm talking about it on national TV, which most politicians would run away from because it's something that's essential that we have to get done.
Congressman, many economists are struggling to understand the rationale in terms of the timing of these tax cuts at a time when we're already almost near full employment, at a time when we should be using that money to actually plug that deficit gap. But there is one explanation that some Democrats provide, and that is that you all want to actually force these cuts to touching that third rail to actually put us in a situation where we have to make these drastic cuts to these entitlement programs. Can you please speak to that question?
Yeah, I mean, look, that is extreme not hyperbole, it's basically they're assigning extremely terrible motives to us. Look, I know the people I serve with out here. I don't think my friends on the Democratic Party have any bad intentions. We don't have bad intentions. We don't do tax cuts so that we create a terrible deficit and are forced to deal with entitlements. We really do want to balance the budget. But in our view, and it's a different political opinion than the other side of the aisle, we believe that just like a business that's in debt decides to expand to get out of debt, that's the example here. We have to reinvigorate an economy that's been stagnated. Middle class wages are growing, and this is the next issue we have to deal with. We do have pretty close to full unemployment. We have a lot of people that are underqualified that we need to work with job training programs. We also have to understand there's going to be a labor shortage in this country, and so when we talk about immigration reform, one of those things is how to bring high-skilled visas here to, to have people that get educated in the United States stay in the United States and start their business.
Congressman Jonathan Lemire, I wanted to get your take on these revelations and text messages that we've seen among FBI agents about both the now President Trump, but also what they've said about then President Obama and what he has asked about the Russia probe last year. But moreover, broader point, what do you think of these sustained attacks from the White House and other members of your party against the Bureau?
So, look, the Bureau is filled with a bunch of heroes. I got a good friend that I used to fly with in the military that's an FBI agent now. We all know FBI agents. These are people that don't get paid a whole lot of money and put their lives at risk. I don't like when anybody tries to discredit the Bureau as a whole. To the extent that there were improprieties, we should know about it. Now, we've released our memo. I'm fully in favor of the Democrats releasing their memo, as long as sources and methods aren't shown, which supposedly there are in this. So let's see what this all is. We can make a determination, and then I would love to see the Intel Committee get back to determining what they need to determine in terms of collusion, in terms of election methods, anything else. And I think most of us out here would say Robert Mueller investigation is not affected by this. It needs to go forward, and we need to find out what happened. And ultimately, if anybody is guilty, they'll be held accountable, and if anybody's innocent, they'll be adjudicated in this process.
All right, Congressman.